This is the theme for a show about food. They'll be chopping and dicing and simmering too. There'll be various ingredients mixed all together in various amounts that she doesn't quite measure. There's pots and there's pans and some knives and a sink, and once in a while an alcoholic drink. So watch when you can and you'll learn something new about spices and rices and some kind of stew. And this is the part where we tell you the name of the show.
Hi guys, welcome to Fatkid. Thank you for joining us again. Today I'm going to be making carne asada burritos and my side of fried corn and peppers that you can either put on the burritos or serve as a side dish all on its own because it's delicious. So I'm going to take you through all of the ingredients here with my new friend, White Claw. Not a sponsor, just really delicious. So now I'm going to take you through everything you need for the carne asada burritos. You're going to need some cooking oil, salt and pepper obviously, some kind of beef. You can get stew meat and cut it up because it's never small enough, or you can buy whatever roast is on sale and use that. And sometimes they even have like London broil and manager special. As long as you're going to use it before the expiration date, then you're fine. So whatever kind of meat. I will say you need to use beef for this recipe.
Where's the beef?
And it can't be ground beef. So normally I can switch off proteins. It's not going to be the same. So I want you to stick with this one. You can play with it after you stick with it. A Vidalia onion, some nice Roma tomatoes, my Goya con azafran. You don't have to use that. I just always do. You can use it if you like, or you can use some warm spices like coriander, turmeric, saffron, stuff like that. And then a lime, some garlic, some fresh cilantro, and whatever kind of heat you like. I use it minimally, so I use this, but you can use hot sauce. You can leave the heat out altogether. You can use gochujang, you can use red hot, you can use jalapenos, but I just use this. So I'm gonna show you how to get started. This recipe is really cool because it's just a chop and drop. It's so easy, very few ingredients. It cooks without you having to micromanage it. And it's just a nice recipe for summer in the warmer weather. So when you are cutting your meat, you want to get size pieces about this big. And I'm just going to throw this in. Again, I've been warming some extra virgin olive oil on medium-high heat. So I'm going to put that in right now. You get it kind of flattened. We're not browning this meat. Chefs will tell you not to overcrowd your pan because you're essentially steaming your meat when you do that, which is true. And you normally need to do it in batches. But this recipe is so easy because it has so few ingredients. And again, it's a chop and dump. So throw your meat in there, and while your meat's working, I'm just gonna season it up a little bit. So a nice hefty portion of salt because you have to season everything that's going in there. Some nice black pepper. Don't be afraid to season your food. A lot of food goes unseasoned because people are afraid of salt and pepper. So I'm just gonna mix this around. Again, I don't need a crust on this meat. You can if you like that bite, but really, ultimately, this meat needs to be cooked down to where it's just completely falling apart. It's almost like strands. So take your onion and just chop and dump. Get it all in there. Give it a little stir. The meat's looking good. Again, you can turn it down if your oven seems to be a little too hot, or your stovetop. Mine's good. It's at a nice little roll when I stop messing with it, and that's where I want it because nothing's gonna burn that way. Now I'm gonna go on to my tomatoes. I've cut the top off of my tomato just because I don't like this little stem thing here. You can leave it in, it's not that big a deal. I also do not seed these tomatoes. The seeds are fine. If the seeds bother you, you can take them out, but I find they just melt into the mixture of the beef and the sauce. So I'm just gonna chop. Same thing that we did for the onion. You just wanna rough chop this stuff. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to look pretty. but you just need stuff that'll kind of melt in. You're not gonna have pieces of tomato in your burrito. You're gonna have just that lovely tomato flavor that concentrates down. So the seeds don't really bother me at all in this. So chop and dump. So I'm just gonna stir this all around. So I'm using about 2 to 3 pounds of meat. Again, this recipe is super forgiving. 1 large onion. In here I have 9 very large Roma tomatoes, but they usually come a little smaller, so you can use anywhere between 9 and 12 for this recipe. And my husband will put up the ratios on the screen so that you know exactly how many tomatoes you need per pound of meat. So I'm using about 8 cloves of garlic here, but you can certainly adjust that down. I know that there are certain people who are not big fans of garlic, Dad and Papa Joe. Anyway, I'm going to crush this garlic first because it makes it easier to chop down. And I always add more garlic to recipes. I just love it, and I think it's super medicinal, so I add it to almost all my dishes, at least all the savory ones. So I'm just gonna chop it up and drop. I got my cilantro, so chop, drop, drop. That's my heat. Then I'm gonna add the juice of a lime. If they're too stubborn and you can't get the juice out of them, you can put them in the microwave for a few seconds and it'll soften them up so they'll be easier to squeeze. So I'm stirring everything in. We have a nice little bubble. When you stop stirring, you can see the bubbling going on. That's what you want. You don't want it crazy. You want to cover it and cook it probably about an hour, but again, this varies. You can do this in a crock pot as well and leave it all day and it's fine. You just want to make sure at the end that your beef is very, very tender, broken apart, and that your sauce has dissipated enough that it isn't rolling down your sleeve when you try to take a bite. And I'll bet you thought there wasn't going to be any alcohol in this. Sorry, kids. Half a bottle of really good red wine. I'm using Josh Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's delicious. And I forgot to show it when I showed the ingredients, but you literally stir in a half a bottle of good red wine, cover this up, make sure it's at a bubble but not burning to the bottom of your pan. Now I'm going to show you how to put together my fried corn and peppers. All of the recipes will be in the comments once this is posted. For this dish, we need a little bit of fresh cilantro, some lime, a red, orange, and green pepper. These are huge though, so you don't need ones this big. I probably won't use all of this. I'm using fresh corn here, but you can certainly use a bag of frozen corn from the grocery store. I've done that as well. When you get it home, you just stick it in the fridge instead of the freezer so it thaws out, and then it's perfectly fine to use. But I like using the fresh corn. I'm going to show you when I break it down, something I do with the cobs. So anyway, we do a Vidalia onion, a little pinch of cayenne pepper, some coriander, and some cumin, and a lot of butter, and some oil, salt, and pepper. So with the corn, you obviously have to get it off of the cob. So you just take a good sharp knife and run it down the length of the cob and let the corn, do it slowly though, because the corn tends to fall just outrageously far from the cob. So you just cut this all off, and I'm gonna do that with all of the cobs, but I wanna show you really quickly. When I cut the corn off the cob, and the cob is clean, I like to take the back of my knife and just run it down the cob like this. And what you see is this, it's a mixture of the rest of the corn kernels, but it's also what I call corn milk. I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but it's delicious. It adds a creamy layer that you won't get if you use frozen corn, but it's totally fine. It's just a little more creamy and yummy if you use fresh, especially when it's in season. But please don't use canned, because canned vegetables are disgusting, and an entire generation of children have been ruined for vegetables because of them. So all of our corn is cut off the ears and all of the milk has been scraped out with the little nubs of the rest of the kernels. And I'm gonna put that aside. We're gonna use onion in this recipe also, but it's gonna be a much finer dice than it was for the meat. What we want basically is for the rest of the vegetables that are going in with the corn to be roughly the size of the kernel, so it's all kind of uniform. So I'm only gonna use about a half a cup each of an onion, an orange pepper, red pepper, green pepper, and the juice of probably about half a lime, a little sprinkle of cilantro, and then we'll put the spices in. But I wanted to just let you know, this is a much finer dice than what you saw for the meat, which is that's just a chop and dump recipe that sits and doesn't need much babysitting, which is perfect for a lot of people who are struggling for time or even the will to undertake such a thing once they get home from a full day of working. So our beef's been cooking a while, and I just want to stir it. So now is the time where I want to take the lid off and turn up the heat just a little bit. We want this to bubble because now we want to start to reduce and concentrate this liquid. So I'm just chopping up a tiny bit of cilantro, probably about a tablespoon's worth. You don't need a ton because you're putting the dried in as well. And if you don't have it, use one or the other. If you don't have dried, use fresh. If you don't have fresh, use dried. So I'm gonna check in on our meat now, give it a stir. It looks really good. I can see the sauce is becoming the color it's supposed to be and it's reducing down. I can feel that the meat is nicely tender, which is really, really good. Because when you bite into it, you don't have to wrestle with your burrito. I have my olive oil warming in my pan at about low to medium heat. And I'm gonna add my onions. Actually, I'm gonna add my butter first. So I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons of butter first and get it going. You can see where the heat is once the butter hits the oil. So that's right where you want it to be. You see how you have it, you hear a little sizzle, and it coats the bottom of the pan nicely. You can turn up the heat just a little bit depending on how fast your butter is melting. But you want this to be a really hot pan because the idea is to get a little char if you can, although I'm not sure I can achieve that here with a non-stick pan, but that doesn't mean that it's not gonna be delicious anyway. So I'm gonna add my onions now that our butter is pretty much melted. And for this one, I normally add all the spices at this point, but for this one, I'm only gonna add the salt and pepper. I wanna be able to taste as we go. I may end up even adding some sugar to this, depending on how sweet the corn is. It's that time of year where the corn is starting to show up in the grocery store again in the produce section. I'm starting with the onion first here because I don't want a nasty bite of raw onion in our corn relish. So I'm gonna start that and let that go a little bit, maybe about 2 to 3 minutes, and then I'm gonna add my corn. So our onions are really grooving here. They look really good. I've turned up our heat because I wanted them at this kind of a sizzle when I add my corn. So my onions are looking good. I'm gonna add my fresh corn, all of it with the corn milk and all. And this is gonna be so delicious. It's really something people don't expect. That's why I love this dish. So I want to make sure that my onions and corn are all coated in the oil and butter. You would start to get a char at this point if you were using a non-stick pan, but you don't want to use too high a heat on a non-stick pan or it releases toxic chemicals that can be harmful to pets or kids. So you just want to get that all covered and spread out and cover it for about, I'd say about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and check. Our meat is perfectly tender and delicious now, except we have all of this liquid. You can do 2 things here. You can continue to cook it with the cover off, reducing the flavor and the sauce, which will be wonderful, or you could eat it now at this point, but you'd have to strain some of the liquid out so that you don't have it dripping down your arm. It's been about 5 minutes and our corn is looking good, nice and yellow. Now I'm gonna add my peppers, my red, green, and orange peppers that I cut to approximately the same size as the corn. I am putting these in later in the recipe because I like them to be on this side of harder. I like the little sweet pop and crunch it gives. I think if you overcook it, the peppers get hammered and they don't give you that effect that you're looking for as much. I'm also, once I get this all incorporated, gonna add my spices, lime juice, and butter. Add the juice of a half a lime. I've added a little more butter. You can dial that back if you have somebody in your family that is watching their weight, although this is not a figure-friendly recipe, darling, so your friend is gonna have to go to a Jenny Craig when they're done eating. Anyway, I'm gonna add some coriander, about, oops, so I would say that's about a teaspoon and a half of coriander. Be careful with your cayenne pepper. I do just a couple of shakes to start out and check the heat level as I cook. And then some ground cumin. You want about a half a teaspoon of ground cumin. You don't want to go too crazy with that because a little goes a long way. And now it's about just babysitting it a little bit. It's obviously, you could eat it right now because the peppers don't need to be fully cooked, but this is it. This is all you need. You can cook it longer if you like your stuff a little more well done. I'm gonna pull it from the heat right now because this is how we like it. And then I will show you how to put our burritos together when we get back. So now I'm gonna put these in the microwave for about 20 seconds. And by the way, guys, I am not a wizard. These are the package instructions, so. I took the time while we were waiting for our meat to get ready to put together some either sides or garnishes, depending on how you like to eat your burritos. But we're gonna have some rice and beans. We're gonna have some refried beans on the side, some cheese, lettuce, scallions, more cilantro, lime juice. Any garnishes that you like or side dishes that you like, sure, add them up. But try it this way first. I think you're really gonna be surprised. So it looks like our meat is exactly where we want it. And you tell by taking your spatula, running it through your pan, and the liquid doesn't immediately fill in. There's still a space of pan. That's your sweet spot. That's where it's reduced down enough and it's perfect for your burrito. This is the fun part. This is where we get to put the burritos together. Don't overstuff your burrito is my big tip. So on my burrito, I'm gonna have a party here because I have so many fillings, right? So I'm just gonna put a little refried bean down on mine. Doesn't have to be perfect or even. Little beans and rice, just to give it enough, you know, to make it feel like a meal. You want something substantial when you eat a burrito, but you also have to remember what goes in is gonna come out if you're not careful. A little bit of cheese. I don't like a lot of cheese. You can go nuts. I have salsa and lime. I'm gonna put a little lime in, a little bit extra, a little bit of fresh cilantro, although I think we have enough cilantro in this dish already, but it's still awesome if you like cilantro. I like a little oniony bite with some scallions. Little bit just down the sides of the sour cream. I don't want a mouthful of sour cream when I bite into my burrito. I don't want the salsa, I don't want the lettuce. I'm gonna go to my meat first and just get a little layer of that down like this. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want too much, and just a little bit of this corn salsa. I like to put it inside. I like the sweet pop when you bite into it, so I don't put it on the side. So here's your fillings. Get everything going. I like to start at the bottom. This is not the be-all end-all way. You do you. But I like to, when I fold my burrito, this is an important step. I like to make an extra pleat here so that the juice, that whatever's left in that meat doesn't come running down my arm when I go to eat my burrito. So I'm gonna do that on both sides. So you have it like this, see? And then you roll over one side very tightly, and then the other side, while you're holding down that first side, the other side just comes right over like that. You have a nice tightly wrapped burrito that isn't gonna run down your arm. So although this isn't a meal that I want you to replace the protein, you certainly could, but you'd have to definitely adjust how you cooked it and the timing. These are tiny burritos, sure, but you can make as many as you want because you're at home and there's no one there to judge your fat face. Or you could even save some of the meat in the corn and put it over tortilla chips with cheese and all kinds of toppings for nachos. These make fantastic nachos as well. So thank you for joining us this one time and seeing this Mexican feast. I hope you make it. I hope you love it. And please, please, please like, watch, and share my videos.